Hi, it's Ness from Lockyer again, and today I'm just going to do a little bit more on the chalkboard art that we were talking about in the last video. So this time I'm going to show you some things on an actual chalkboard. All this is a little MDF placemat that I've just gone and painted with some chalkboard paint. And the key to making the chalk sit well is to season the surface. So all you do with this is you just get a piece of chalk and just rub the chalk lightly backwards and forwards until you've covered it, and then just get a cloth or something and rub your hands through the chalk just to cover the whole piece, dust off whatever is left over, and you're left with a, you know, like a more traditional looking blackboard style, which, you know, always looks really nice when you're doing chalkboard pieces. But you can clean it off. Once you've done this, you can wipe it right back to clean. It'll give you the same kind of effect, but you've just the fact that you've keyed up the surface and made that paint not so newish. The chalk can sort of bite a little bit more into the paint without leaving a mark or a ghost, as I call it. So then you can just see the work previously that you've done, and you don't want that. So anyway, moving on. So these are the things that I use mostly when I'm doing chalkboard art, especially if it's on a big board. My favourite is a watercolour pencil. These are just by Faber-Castell. And if you're going to use a pencil, just make sure that it is a watercolour pencil. I've made the mistake before of picking up a Prismacolor or just a regular white pencil by mistake, thinking it was one of my watercolour ones, and of course that doesn't come off. If that's the look that you're after, that you don't want it to come off, then fine, use one of those. But if you want to reuse it, the watercolour is great because obviously it dissolves in water and you just wipe it off and start again. So watercolour pencil, I just use regular old chalk. This is just chalk that you buy from any craft store. There's a million different, any chalk will do, honestly. And then what I do is I actually sharpen, just with a regular sharpener, sharpen it to a point. Now, don't waste that powder. Keep that, because that's great for shading, and we can look a little bit at that later. But for now, we're just going to be using a regular piece of chalk. But if you do happen to have a watercolour pencil laying around at home, by all means grab it. And you can use any colour, it doesn't have to be white, but we want that kind of whiteboard finish, so that's what we're going with. And what I thought I'd show you today is just 3 words, basically, or 4 really if you count the and, but I always use an ampersand for an and, so 3-4 words. And just touching on what we did in the last video where we had capitals, some script and some banners and things like that. So we're going to just build on that and just do a sign. And it's a pretty basic design. And depending on how you're going to lay it out, so you can map, chalk out some little lines, you know, do a center line, do a line through the middle, and then you can just rule out any spacing that you want. I tend to just do mine freehand, but that's how I am. And so when you've got your piece, you want to figure out, and I've got, this is what I did previously, let me just grab it. So I've just kind of mapped it out on some paper just to show you guys this is what we are doing. This is it in its basic form. Cupcakes, coffee and love. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward, and a great way to get you into chalkboard lettering. So what I tend to do is look at the very top word, and I just count back in towards the middle. So I know that the center line, if you were going to draw the center line through your board, that would sit right in between the C and the A. It just gives you a little starting point. So we might just sit that here so we can see what we're doing, and that way you can see where we're going. So center line is roughly just, you know, I just like to eyeball mine. Now I'm a little bit weird. I like to draw from the inside letters that we've just counted in towards out. I don't start at the start of the word and work my way across. I find that the spacing just turns out a lot better for me if I do it back this way. So let's just get going. Now, I've got this word on a curve, a little bit of a curve. If you want to, you can sort of ghost out a little curve. You could use a bowl, or if you've got an actual, template that has a bit of a curve on it, or anything really, an oval shaped plate, something just to get you that basic, that basic shape. So I'm just going to work my way across, and I'm just writing them in basic lettering at the minute. I'm not doing anything, tremendous and creative at the minute. I'm just writing the letters in. And sometimes you'll find you'll go a little bit across to one side or a little bit across to the other. Don't stress when you're just having a practice. All you're doing is getting the feel for it. It's not meant to be hanging in a museum anywhere. This is just so you can practice. And the more you do it, the better you'll get at eyeballing these end bits. So once I've done that, I could go on and finish the rest of it, but I find if you do that, you're going to come back with your hand and you're going to smudge those words. A little tip for that is to lay a piece of paper over what you've just done, and then you can continue on without annoying that. If you need to come back, say I've written stuff down here already, I would put this over, and then I've got something to lean my hand on so I'm not disturbing that chalk underneath. So what we'll do is we'll work on this word first and we'll work our way down. So I'm going to actually move my sleeve out the way just so I'm not getting stuff in the way. Okay, so with your words, all you need, your letters I should say, all you need to do is come around, and we did touch on this before, and we're just going to do, remember that downstroke, which is anything that is towards your body would have a heavier line. So now I'm just going to mimic that with my piece of chalk. If you find your chalk gets blunt, just sharpen it again. You don't need to push really hard. It's not like a pencil either. You just sort of lightly. Now see, my hand is going over that and I'm getting chalk dust. So that's where this piece of paper can come in handy, just to stop you disturbing those letters underneath. Okay, so once we've done that, we can then come back and just add a little, I call these a hat and shoes. So you've got at the top of the letter it's a hat, at the bottom of the letter it is a shoe. If you come across any letters where you may have smooshed it with your hand a bit like that one, just go over it and make it a little bit darker. So you're just going to work your way through to the end of your word. Okay, and then you have cupcakes. Just gives it a little bit something more when you add that shadowing. So from here again, now you can go through and you could put a little line. I'm actually going to sharpen my chalk a little bit more. And I'm just going to add a little line. I'm just following along those downstrokes basically. I don't want it to be as dark as the actual lettering because it is meant to be a shadow, so I just want it to be a little bit lighter and not sort of stand out too much. Now you don't need to do this, you can leave this out if you just like the other way. And that's it, that's your first word. So next up we have this banner. So remember we spoke about the banners in the last videos. Because you've already made that arch, it's actually giving you a little bit of a guide as to where to put that angle. So remember, start with this, then you can add in the tail. You can do it like that, like we spoke about in the last video. It doesn't have to be how I just did that then. So if you've been practicing with these, you'll get like a you know, a bit of your own style to it. So I'm just going to write coffee. So again, you can count the words, the letters in from the center. So we know that in between the two F's is the middle of the word. If you feel comfortable starting from one end to the end, that's fine. You do it your way. This is just how I prefer to do it. Okay, so once we've done that, you can go in and add, you know, a little bit of shadowing here. You could put a little line, you know, just a little bit of definition basically to the ends of your banner. Just gives it a little bit more, just a bit more of something. Now we're going to move on to the next part, which is an ampersand. Now this is how I always do my ampersand. There's a million ways you can do them. So you can, that is the traditional way, is that shape. You could do a plus. You could write the word and if you want. That's totally up to you. But I'm going to just stick with my ampersand that I always use. So this is where your script, this is where your own handwriting comes into its own. Now again, downstroke. I'm just going to add those in. And then just finish with the word love. Go through and add those downstrokes. And if you do get little chalky bits on your board, just dust them off, just blow them. And then I'm just going to add a little love heart at the end. Now, if you want to add some flourishes, you could put, so just remember whatever you're doing, it always looks better if they're mirrored. But sometimes I don't. Sometimes I leave them and have them different on either side, just, you know, something a little bit different. You can go as bananas as you want with these. Flourishes, just, you could keep going. You could add leaves, you could add coffee beans, you could add love hearts all over it with little, you know, little swirls between. It's completely up to you, but that's it. So let's do a letter, we'll just do a letter D. Now I'm going to make this solid just so you can see the difference. We can build on all of these techniques too as we go on. This just sort of gives you a bit of an idea. Okay, so if I was to do a shadow like this, you can't, I mean, you can see it, but you can't really see the definition between the shadow as much as you'd like. So this is one of my secret weapons, is a earbud, Q-tip, whatever you want to call it. I just dip the end. On one end I have a little tiny bit of water, not a lot, just enough to kind of make it a little bit damp, and the other end I leave dry. So I'll just dip this in some water. Okay, you don't want too much, so just squeeze off that excess. And then just kind of put in a little bit of a point. Now what you want to do is go down that line. Notice how much more defined that makes the D look. So the end that's dry, just not always double check, because I've made this mistake before. I've used the wet end where I actually wanted it to be dry. So with the dry end, you can just sort of feather off the ends a little bit. And if you've taken too much, this is where your dust comes in handy. And you can just go back and dust it up a little bit more. So that's another method you can use if you were, say with the cupcakes, we could have done it with this method and had a solid lettering with a really defined shadow, and kept going along that way. And the good thing with this is if you do make a mistake, you can always come back and tidy anything up with your chalk, so you can just play around to your heart's content. Another way is using the dry end. You can just kind of smudge in a little bit of that chalk from the center, and it gives you a little bit of shadowing. If you think it needs a little bit more, I'll just put that wet end of the Q-tip just to take a little bit more of the chalk away. So it gives you another version of that lettering, just starting with basic chalk and then rubbing little bits away and using that water will give you so many different styles to a letter. You could just, that could just be a line like what we did up here, just a simple line. And you could still come through, it doesn't work as well on the watercolor as it does with the chalk, but you could still come through and do that line and just break up your word. You could even use just a really fine damp paintbrush to do that, but I always have these in my toolkit. So I always have, you know, a small Ziploc bag of these along with my chalk and my pencil, and always have a sharpener, and usually have like a little cloth or something with me too. So that way I've got everything that I need. A small, a little small fold out ruler is always handy, especially if you're up a ladder. You don't want to be carrying a huge big, you know, ruler, and you don't want something like a tape measure where it's going to flex and bend. You need something that's quite structured. This is the one that I use, which is actually an old carpenter's ruler that flips out and then turns into a metre long ruler. So they're great to just have, you know, they fit into like a little pencil case with all of my bits and bobs. That's pretty much it. So what I want to say is have a go at this. Try a few different methods with the chalk, and if you can get your hands on a watercolor pencil, which most places sell them these days, you can buy them singly, which is great. I think I pay about maybe $3 for a pencil at our local Officeworks store. You can also buy them in boxes of just one colour, so that's great if you're doing a lot of it. But just, you know, general, just kids chalk even, doesn't have to be anything fancy, doesn't have to be white, it can be any colour if you want, but have a go. And remembering that this is just a little piece of MDF that I've painted with some chalkboard paint. You can get at any hardware craft shop. you know, let it dry, do sort of 2 to 3 coats, and then remember to season. So rub this all over the board and then just rub your fingers in to season it up a bit, and then you're good to go. So have a go with those, because the next video that I'm going to put up will be a menu. So we're going to, not a menu, a recipe I should say. It'll be a recipe that we're going to make in a chalkboard style. So if you pictured something up on a cafe wall or whatever, that's what we're going to be doing, which will be a mixture of calligraphy, chalkboard art, that kind of thing. And it's a really good recipe too, so you can save it for later. But yeah, until then, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. See ya.